As talk is circulating in the alternative media regarding the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, and the 10th Amendment, and state nullification regarding gun control, the Obama regime may use an obscure, seldom discussed clause in the Constitution to ban not only assault rifles, but handguns as well. Before I address this clause, it is important to note that Obama will meet with the United Nations from March 18th through the 28th to reach a final agreement on the Arms Trade Treaty. Hours after his election in November, he stated in a draft to the United Nations that the United States would support and enter into a treaty with the UN on the small arms and light weapons agreements. It is important to note that the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty was initially dubbed the Program of Action to Prevent, Combat, and Eradicate the Illicit Trade in Small Arms and Light Weapons in all its aspects, underlined. Think about that for a moment. Its initial purpose, derived in 2001, has not changed: global disarmament of the people. Although the Arms Trade Treaty on the UN website highlights international weapons trade, terms like eradicate and illicit are not clearly defined. I'm quite sure after this treaty is ratified and its restrictions imposed on all of us, we will soon find out the scope of these definitions. The Obama regime will do an end run around the Second Amendment and trump any nullification legislation adopted by the states by using Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, otherwise known as the Supremacy Clause. This clause, as best as I can interpret it, was originally set forth to address treaties entered into by the federal government, and due to the somewhat vagueness of the wording, it does not specify domestic versus international treaties, and Obama will use this ambiguity to force the American people into involuntary disarmament. How will the Supremacy Clause trump the Second Amendment? Here's how it reads, according to Wikipedia. Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, known as the Supremacy Clause, I have a really bad cold, establishes the U.S. Constitution, federal statutes, and U.S. treaties, and by the way, the Arms Trade Treaty is an international treaty, as the supreme law of the land. The text decrees these to be the highest form of law in the U.S. legal system and mandates that all state judges must follow federal law when a conflict arises between federal law and either the state constitution or state law of any state. Note that the word shall is used, which makes it a necessity and a compulsion. The Supremacy Clause is the most important guarantor of national union. It assures that the Constitution and federal laws and treaties take precedence over state law and binds all judges to adhere to that principle in their courts. An important footnote here, it's the Senate, not the House, that has exclusive powers to ratify treaties, and we know whose thumb the Senate is under. Wikipedia goes on to state, the Supremacy Clause only applies if Congress is acting in pursuit of its constitutionally authorized powers. Federal laws are valid and are supreme so long as those laws were adopted in pursuance of, that is, that they are consistent with the Constitution. Now the question here might be, is the Constitution even relevant when entering into international treaties, or does the UN Constitution supersede it? Big question. It goes on to say, nullification is the legal theory that a state has the right to nullify or invalidate any federal law which the state has deemed unconstitutional or exceeds Congress's constitutionally authorized powers. The courts have found that under Article 3 of the Constitution, the final power to declare federal laws unconstitutional has been delegated to the federal courts, and that the states therefore do not have the power to nullify federal law. And as we have already witnessed, the federal courts have caved to Obama's demands to uphold his right to ignore the Constitution regarding the NDAA and other legislation and executive orders which have come into challenge by federal courts such as the National Resource Preparedness Act, all under the shroud of national security and individual safety. And as Obama prepares to hammer out the final details of the UN Arms Trade Treaty on March 18th, we know little about these details he intends to address or the scope to which they will affect every gun owner and law-abiding citizen in America. My question is, why would the Founding Fathers be compelled in the 10th Amendment to provide a remedy for the states to nullify federal legislation deemed unconstitutional, only to supply a remedy in Article 6, Section 2, the Supremacy Clause, to trump that remedy provided in the 10th Amendment for state nullification? The answer may be found in the preemption doctrine of the Supremacy Clause, which is a 20th century development. No state statute was ever invalidated for anything other than a straightforward conflict with a specific federal regulation until 1912, and the focus on congressional intent wasn't employed as the touchstone of preemption until the New Deal, just 1 year before the private Federal Reserve Bank was supposedly ratified. Coincidence? Keep in mind, Barry Soetoro, a.k.a. Barack Hussein Obama, a constitutional lawyer and admittedly poor student, was obviously paying attention in class that day on that subject. Once again, while the mainstream media and Obama's regime have us running around with our hair on fire about state nullification, the Second Amendment, and gun control, we are intentionally being misdirected once again to the real threat that lies within the auspices of international treaty ratification and the trump card Obama's holding by exercising the Supremacy Clause. In conclusion, secession may be our only choice if this end run is played out. Nullification will not be an option. Time is running out. The regime is meeting in little over a month and a half to finalize the details on the Arms Trade Treaty, and adoption and ratification will be swift. It's important, excuse me, it is important to note that the regime is very aware of secession as an ultimate remedy to the states and its citizenry being involuntarily bound by unconstitutional laws and restrictions adopted by federal legislation or international treaties, which are designed to strip Americans of their sovereignty and unalienable rights. And that is why, on January 15th, Obama's deputies have quadrupled the number of signatures from 25,000 to 100,000 that petitioners on the administration's We the People website must collect to get an official response from the White House regarding secession or any other petition for a redress of grievances. And, by the way, another little caveat is that the petition must acquire 100,000 signatures within 30 days. Secession may be our only remedy as a last-ditch effort to protect and preserve our individual rights and sovereignty. This government is corrupt to the core. It's been subverted from within, and it cannot be fixed, and it could give a damn about the wants or concerns of the people. It is a tool for the ushering in of global governance, UN domination, global banking domination, and according to that agenda, America must be destroyed, as it will be the final domino to fall. If you have any doubts how the federal government honors treaties, just ask any Native American, and they'll tell you that after they entered into their treaty with the federal government stole their land, forced them onto reservations, and forced them into poverty, where most of these people remain to this day, living off government welfare, enough to enable them to subsist, and too little to escape a world of entrapment or slavery created by government. I look forward to your comments for discussion and would ask that anyone who can explain how the ratification of the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty can be nullified by the states, given the ultimate precedence of the Supremacy Clause, can be accomplished. Please explain this or post your own video on this channel to clarify this. Please leave your comments for discussion below on this topic, and I would urge you to share this video with everyone you know now. Thank you for watching.